Thanks for having me, David.
So before we start, Steve, so let's talk about your favorite superhero.
Hit me with that one. All right. Yeah, no, I know this is going to sound unoriginal, but I was always a Spider-Man guy growing up. He seemed to have probably the least traumatic origin story. It just seemed so cool, getting bit by a spider and then being able to do really cool things. I don't know. That was always my thing.
No, that's fair enough. Like I said, anything but. Tell us about yourself and kind of where you are today in the company, the background, and then how you became a recruiter, specifically in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, so I graduated from school about 4 years ago. I went to Florida State. I was living in Tampa. I had a little bit of experience in an IT staffing firm at the time. It wasn't the greatest experience in the world. And then at that point, nothing really keeping me there. I did what everybody does. I chased a girl to New York. That didn't work out, but the career moves I made in the process did. I reached out to a couple friends. I didn't really have a lot of direction. One of my old college buddies talked to me about this small but growing recruitment firm called Hamlyn Williams. They focused on corporate governance recruitment, which I knew absolutely nothing about. Didn't know that was a thing. But it was just so unique to me. I had obviously a pretty bad experience with staffing, with that sort of churn and burn model where a recruiter comes in, if they're successful for 6 months to 18 months, they get promoted to account manager, and then they're in a sales focused role, and they get their own recruiters to bully around. This was more of 360 consulting is what we call it, but it's basically taking a market segment and being an expert in that space, connecting clients with candidates yourself, not having that sort of go-between. So there was this sense of dignity to recruitment that I didn't know was possible. It hadn't been exposed to yet, so I was definitely excited about it. I joined, as far as my journey once I joined the company, things were very different when I joined. I think I was number 8 in New York. Now I'm the 3rd longest tenured with the firm in New York. We've opened offices in San Diego and Dallas in that time. But as far as where I started, there weren't a lot of L&D processes. There wasn't a lot of formalized training. I reported directly to my CEO at the time. He said, "So what do you want to focus on? I hear cyber's a pretty good market." And I was like, "Sure, sounds good. Let's do it." And so I kind of picked it up and ran with it. It was very much sink or swim. I think that's sort of the issue with the recruitment. The bad rap that the recruitment gets, I think, is the fact that it is a lot of people who just start out. They don't have an established candidate network. They don't have an established client network, and very little knowledge of the space. All you really have at that point is volume. So I was in the office, 6 days a week for 12 hours, 13 hours a day, just grinding away, trying to get market share from the established guys. Because again, I didn't have those tools to work off of. So it didn't take me long to realize that the conversations I was having in cyber were a lot different than the conversations that my colleagues were having on, let's say, the audit desk or the compliance desk. There's this passion to what you guys do and how you take your jobs seriously, and just the passion you feel for your jobs day to day, that is very unique. So. Yeah, I mean that's that. From there, I moved up. I was able to establish that network. I've had the opportunity in the last 18 months to kind of do my own hiring. Manage a team, and now I'm heading up that entire division within the company. So it's been a great experience. Started out for the wrong reasons. I moved to New York, but it ended up being great for me.
Yeah, I know a couple other people that have done the same, so don't feel so bad. Me included, by the way.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's a little bit too much revealing, over here on one time. So we talked a bit about, your approach to placing candidates, and maybe talk to me about specifically, what's hot right now in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, I mean, as far as my approach, I think that is sort of something that makes me a little different than a lot of, I mean, I'm sure everybody here has had a bad experience with a recruiter at some point in time. You know, the model, you think of the traditional recruitment model, it's you know, you pull a job, is what we call it, you know, where a client has given you the opportunity to provide candidates for that job. You then hit every job board you know, you're reaching out to everybody, you're working off finding as many candidates that could be right for that job as possible. You're maximizing your potential to get a fee by getting as many candidates as possible. So that's generally the model, and it creates issues, obviously. My approach has always been a little different, and I think the cyber market has allowed me to work this way just because the candidate market is so light. There is such a demand, there is such a rapid growth rate within the job market, where I work backwards. So I, over the years, have established these relationships, these client relationships where I can identify a very good candidate and then work backwards, you know, get a feel for what their motivations are, get very much into detail about what their ideal role looks like, compensation requirements, locations, things like that, and then just give them as comprehensive a view of the market as possible. So basically working backwards, finding a good candidate and getting him into as many interview processes as possible. I think the main thing that this does, and you know, kind of talking about sort of unethical behavior in the recruitment market, is that it takes away any motivation that I have to be sort of a used car salesman. You know, when I'm getting a fee, no matter where that candidate goes, I can take any sort of actual like recruitment or like selling the job out of it. I can basically just say, hey, I'm going to make the introductions to what I think would represent a great role for you. Hopefully at the end of the day, you're sitting on 3 or 4 offers all through me. And then, you know, I can just kind of lend advice as I need to, but I don't have the motivation to be, you know, let's say, really building up the things that do appeal while completely downplaying things that might not appeal, which I think a lot of recruiters do. I don't have the motivation to do that based on the way that I work, if that makes sense.
And you know, so what's hot like in terms of in the cyberspace right now in terms of roles? Yeah,
I think realistically, you know, when you look at two sides to information security, there's your more technical cyber work, and then there's your more information governance. In cyber, I think automation is king right now. You know, just when you look at you know, it doesn't matter what segment we're talking about, the ability to automate processes and sort of incorporate cloud environments into what you're doing, those are the candidates that are getting the best looks right now. From more of an information governance perspective, you look at just how much like user and customer like data privacy has come into the fold recently. GDPR is all over the place, and again, I know that everything went into effect in May, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't require constant upkeep. Everyone is still hiring for that. DLP is something I didn't really wasn't really on my radar when I started, and now it's you know, it's such an important thing. Again, for your more like traditional like information security, risk management professionals. And then, you know, one thing that I guess is industry-wide is bridging or shrinking the gender gap within the industry. It's no secret that it's male-dominated, and I think a lot of clients are incentivized to shorten that quite a bit. When I find a strong female candidate, I'm getting in front of literally everyone, and it's just I think it makes sense for everyone involved to kind of have those initiatives in place.
Great, and you know, by the way, I've been trying to get, you know, more women speakers here as well. So if you know anybody, feel free. So, you know, so tell me a bit about, you know, success stories, and then, you know, any failures that you can share. I'm sure you have some of those.
Too many. No, I mean, this is going to sound corny, but you know, I look at a success story every time I place a candidate. Based on the way that I work, it does require me to interact with these candidates quite a bit. You know, just again with the market specialism that I have, this isn't a one-time thing where I might get somebody to know a process once, but then, you know, 2 months later something might open up. Another, you know, 2 months later I'm getting them involved repeatedly, and it might take a few attempts to successfully place somebody. So I do genuinely care about the well-being, and I feel like it's always gratifying, when you can kind of successfully place a candidate. It also works the other way too. You develop strong client relationships as well, and there's again that sense of accomplishment, I guess, when a client can come to you, someone who's a senior director or a CISO, someone who you really respect in the technical space, and they're looking at you saying like, Steve, you saved my ass here. That was I'm really happy you could deliver on that role. I think as far as failures go, I mean, I work in an industry where like you really do have to be very, very in the details, because the littlest oversight can be the difference between a placement and not. So there's times where the counteroffer is the worst word in recruitment, and I mean, how you feel about them personally is obviously your call, but from a recruitment perspective, it really does not make sense. I'm getting in the detail enough with my candidates before I ever get them involved in anything to make sure that a counteroffer is not going to solve what's wrong. And that's something that I do require from all my candidates before I send them anywhere or get them in front of everybody, is what isn't necessarily wrong, but what could I make better? What is going on in your situation that could potentially be fixed, solved, or made better? So if somebody just tells me, yeah, everything's perfect where I'm at, but if you give me a higher offer, that's great. That's not a candidate I'll ever work with, because there's nothing to prevent that person from just getting an offer through me, turning it right around to their perfect environment that they're already in, and saying, what can you do to match this? So I've had one counteroffer situation, and it was because
of numbers.
I think about it; it keeps me up at night. It was essentially, I wasn't in the detail. This was somebody who I thought was a government employee, which I was like, don't have to worry about counters. He was actually working for a government contractor, and the CEO threw everything he had at him when he resigned. So it was for a large wealth management organization in Baltimore that no longer works with me. Needless to say. I think
no hard feelings.
Yeah. And then the most frustrating thing about what we do is that you can also be completely in the details. You can do everything right, and still, at the end of the day, not account for the fact that I'm working with people, and people are completely unpredictable. There was a situation where I was actually, my promotions are based on just revenue that I bring in, and I was right on the cusp of senior consultant a few years back, and this was my last placement to get there. I was super pumped. I got the offer. The client presented the offer. They really loved the candidate. Everything was great. Couldn't see anything preventing this from happening. They gave the offer at a 7% bonus instead of a 17% bonus, which I was like, that's a wildly different number, and so then the candidate says that's a different number than we talked about. I spent days and days, working so hard to get, because the offer wasn't changing. That's what it was. Spent days salvaging this, really, really convinced the candidate that it wasn't about the money. It was about the opportunity that's represented, and it was a great organization, great brand recognition in the space. So finally he was like, you know what, you're right, I'm on board. And the client said, he took too long. I don't like that hesitation, I'm out. Pull the offer. So again, there's situations like that where it's just you do everything right, and it still doesn't go your way sometimes.
Yeah, thanks for the story. And this is what I like, that kind of the human element. There's always one even behind technology. So, what changed in the space, specifically in the past, 2-3 years that you've seen? Yeah,
I think I touched on the gender gap and how that is. There are initiatives in place to get that to shrinking, and we're seeing that. I touched on just how automation has become a big thing. I think. One thing I haven't touched on is when I first started, there were a lot of initiatives in place with these large companies that were looking to build out their cybersecurity team. We're trying to do it, not through traditional recruitment or outreach, but by taking their existing IT professionals and moving them and getting them trained up and moving them to the security team. I'm not seeing that as much now. There just wasn't that much success to it because it was either two scenarios. Either, somebody, whether it was a software developer, a sysadmin, network engineer, someone who made that transition into cyber from the CIO's organization. They either didn't, they were like, oh yeah, cyber sounds cool. I'm happy doing my job right now, but I'll do that for you. That's fine. And cyber does require that passion. You know what I mean? That you have to give everything you have to being so good because the industry is full of people who have that passion and they eat, sleep, and breathe it. So they felt like the people who weren't that passionate just didn't have the grind to be able to pick it up, and it didn't really work on from a technical perspective. And the people who did, they didn't feel like they were in a culture of, this is a security culture. This is a company that values security. So they would get trained up. They were one of the people that just looked around and were surrounded by people who weren't as passionate about security as them, and they weren't able to retain those people, and they went on to join organizations that do really value that culture within that identity within the security team.
Great. I have a bunch of other questions, but maybe I'll open up for question. I mean, it's probably a good. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think age discrimination exists in today's hiring practice? If yes, what advice would you give a candidate who's been discriminated because of age?
It's a tough thing. You never really know what the motivations are. Man, that is a loaded question. It really just it depends on the organization because there are some organizations that just hiring at the lower levels want people who are going to be around, who are going to grow with the company, who aren't going to retire in however many handful of years. There's other companies that, like Ross over there. He's one of my guys sitting over there. His best client. That's what the company looks for is people who aren't those people who are gonna grow and then leave. They want people who are going to be sticking around for a while and be okay with the job that they're doing and not be too, I guess, ambitious is the right word. All I can do is just get a sense for what the client wants and provide that. As far as advice about pure age discrimination, all I can say, oh, man, I am not qualified to answer that question whatsoever.
It's okay. This is going to be out of the boundaries of the cybersecurity meetup. I think this is maybe for an HR related.
Yeah, that's definitely something talent acquisition.
HR,
just to answer the question, I mean, I've literally never had that experience before. Whether or not they are honest about their reasoning for rejecting the candidate, I can't read between the lines and interpret things. I mean, hiring managers are going to have their own internal wheels spinning. I can't read minds though, and I can't make accusations against a client that doesn't really make it obvious. That's the only thing I can really say. If that ever did occur though, I can tell you that would be a huge issue, and I would then absolutely fire back at a client, talk about how those things don't really matter as far as someone's ability to do the job. And so. Yeah, that's all I can really say is that I haven't encountered that, and if I did, that would be an issue, and I would take, serious, I guess, offense to that.
That's great.
Okay, so you asked if machine learning was incorporated into matching candidates and clients. I think the rec tech is what we call it. The recruitment tech is about light years behind anything else going on right now. My database is not nearly that advanced. There's a lot of human element to what we do in that matching. It's still. I think there is a reason why the process hasn't really been automated like that, or incorporating AI into what we're doing, because again, there is a human element to culture fit. That's something that a machine can really pick up on.
Not yet.
What's that?
Not yet.
Not yet, at least. Yeah, I'll be out of a job then. But yeah, I think there is very much a human element to what we do that really can't be done with computers yet.
So let me ask the last question, and then you stick around, right? So, if you can give one, great advice to candidates, specifically in this space, what would that be?
It's be a sponge. I mean, that's all you really can do. The one consistent thing when I talk, to a hiring manager about what they're looking for, the one consistent thing doesn't matter what kind of market segment they're in. I need somebody who's passionate about security. I need somebody who eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. And when you are sitting stagnant, you might be in a position that you feel segmented, you feel siloed, you feel like you're not getting the exposure that you want. But let's say you're segmented in an internal pen test role, and you're just pen testing on the same systems all day, every day, and you're not getting any exposure to any other systems. And you're really passionate about incident response, and you want to take that direction in your career. If you are waiting for someone like me to call you up one day and say, hey, I know you're only pen testing, but I have this great incident response position that I want to get you involved in, that's just not going to happen. It requires, you to be proactive, because there's things you can do on, when you clock out, you clock back in when you get home, and you're sandboxing malware, you're getting certs, you're taking online courses, you're showing the narrative of development. You're showing me that even though you don't have the professional experience to do what job I'm talking about, you have the desire. And again, you need to show that on your resume that you have the desire. You can't just tell me, hey, I really want to do incident response, or something along those lines. There's got to be proof of it in your resume, and then that you are somebody who I can stick my neck out on the line with the client for and say, listen, I know he doesn't have the professional, or he or she doesn't have the professional experience that we're looking for, but he's doing this in his spare time. He's staying up all night doing this. He really does want to make this pivot in his career. So I think we should, you should talk to him or her.
Excellent. By the way, that's a universal, I think, advice, not just for for cyber. So help me thank Steve. He's going to stick around here for more questions, and we'll wrap it up after the ruffle. Thank you very much.
Thank
Steve.
you. Appreciate having me, Dave.